All right, good evening, everyone. This is John Tapp with the Western Star 57X, and
keep left, and then turn left.
The truck includes the Rocky Mountain double
turn left
line strap trailer, and we're gonna start with the 61,000-pound tires. It's going to be at the auto parts on the street, and so I got to be careful. So if you have a double trailer or a triple
Here we
trailer,
are, safe and sound.
Be careful. So let's go get those tires and get it going.
Okay, here we go. Never mind, I'll find a new route. Keep right, and then turn right. Turn right. Keep left, and then turn left. Turn left. Keep right, and then exit right. Exit right.
Avalara, providing businesses with cloud-based tools and managed services for property tax compliance, from filing returns to tracking assessments. Learn more at avalara.com/property-tax.
It's All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Juana Summers.
And I'm Ari Shapiro. Senators grilled one of President Trump's nominees for the Federal Reserve Board today. They want to know if he'll be taking orders from the president when it comes to setting interest rates. By law, the Fed is supposed to operate independently of the White House. But Trump has been waging an aggressive campaign to exert more control over the central bank. NPR's Scott Horsley was following the hearing, and he's with us now. Hey, Scott.
Hi, Ari.
Tell us about this nominee.
Stephen Myron is currently a White House economist, and he raised some eyebrows today when he said he plans to keep one foot in that White House job, even if he gets the Fed post. He said he would take an unpaid leave with an eye towards going back to the administration early next year. Nevertheless, Myron told senators if he does find himself sitting in the Fed's boardroom, he would not be taking direction from the president on interest rates.
If I'm confirmed to this role, I will act independently, as the Federal Reserve always does, based on my own personal analysis of economic data and based on my judgment of the best economic policy possible.
Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren was skeptical. She asked Myron a couple of questions in an effort to test his independence.
Did Donald Trump lose the 2020 presidential election?
Joe Biden was certified by Congress as the president of the United States.
Right. So did Donald Trump lose that election?
As I just said, Joe Biden was certified by
Did Donald Trump
Congress.
lose that election? Can you say the words Donald Trump lost that election? Are you independent enough to say that?
As you can hear, Myron ducked that question, along with another one about whether he agreed with the president that government number crunchers have been faking data to make Trump look bad.
Well, explain what is at stake in this nomination.
On the surface, this is just a short-term job. It only lasts about 5 months, filling out the term of Fed Governor Adriana Kugler, who stepped down last month. But Trump is also hoping to create a second opening at the central bank by firing Fed Governor Lisa Cook over allegations of mortgage fraud. Cook, by the way, has denied those allegations, and she's challenging her dismissal in court. But if Trump succeeds in filling both these seats, then a majority of the Fed's 7-member board members would be Trump appointees, and that could mean Trump's constant demands for lower interest rates would get a little more traction at the Fed. Senator Warren, who's the top Democrat on the Senate Banking Committee, says that's the backdrop in which this short-term nomination has to be considered.
We cannot ignore the elephant in the room, and that is that President Trump has launched an all-out assault on the independence of the Federal Reserve.
Now, the reason the Fed is supposed to be independent and insulated from political pressures from the White House is so it can make sometimes unpopular decisions, like keeping interest rates high if that's what's necessary to curb inflation. Of course, Trump has been trying to chip away at that insulation.
How likely is he to get confirmed?
It looks pretty likely. Myron got a friendlier reception from Republicans on the Banking Committee, and of course the GOP has the majority in the Senate. Louisiana Republican John Kennedy stressed that if Myron does wind up at the central bank, he does need to keep the president at arm's length.
Are you Donald Trump's puppet?
Not at all. I'm very independently minded.
We're going to hold you to that, Governor, future Governor. You need to call him like you see him.
So you can hear Kennedy refer to Myron there as a future governor of the Federal Reserve. It looks as if he could be confirmed in time to take part in the Fed's next decision on interest rates, which is coming up in less than 2 weeks, and the Fed is widely expected to lower its benchmark rate by a 0.25 percentage point.
NPR's Scott Horsley, thank you.
You're welcome.
Your ability to get a COVID shot this fall may depend on where you live. States are setting up different policies around vaccines in response to concerns over federal leadership. NPR's Peng Huang reports.
Washington State is banding together with its neighbors to create a West Coast Health Alliance. Dennis Worsham, Washington's health secretary, says it's a preemptive move.
We're seeing something happen that we're concerned, and we're not going to wait to see how it plays out.
Those concerns include staff and budget cuts at federal health agencies, the firing of prominent doctors from vaccine advisory committees, and the firing of the new director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The tipping point came last week, Worsham says, when the Food and Drug Administration put limits on who's eligible for the fall COVID shot.
We as an alliance will work together to review the data that is being put out in order to make recommendations for the people here in the state of Washington, Oregon, and California.
Dr. Erica Pan is director of the California Department of Public Health.
I'm sad that we are in this place that we have to do this.
But the reason they're doing it, she says, is that vaccines do a great job of keeping people healthy.
Vaccines are one of the most important public health interventions in our lifetimes after sanitation. And they have saved, millions of lives. And we want to make sure we continue to do that.
And the advice from the federal government under Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is starting to diverge from those of professional medical groups.
And we do have concerns that access and or recommendations for safe and effective vaccines could change from the federal level.
The CDC's current Vaccine Advisory Committee has not yet weighed in on who should get COVID vaccines this fall. In New Mexico, the delay has prompted Gina de Blasi, the Cabinet Secretary for Health, to issue a public health order to make the vaccines widely available at pharmacies.
The vaccines are anticipated to be received in the state this month. We just want to make sure that we're ready to go and able to serve New Mexicans.
De Blasi says the demand has been highest for those 65 and up.
But we want to make it available for those that are in high-risk populations or those that are caring for individuals that are in that high-risk group.
Massachusetts, which is leading a public health collaboration in the Northeast, has announced that it's requiring insurers to cover vaccines the state recommends. While states with Democratic governors have been zigging to protect vaccine access, the Republican state of Florida has zagged. Yesterday, at a press conference, Florida Surgeon General Joseph Ladapo called COVID vaccines poison and said requiring them echoes slavery.
Who am I as a government, or anyone else, or who am I as a man standing here now, to tell you what you should put in your body?
Ladapo announced that Florida will be working to end all vaccine mandates in the state. His office did not respond to an interview request from NPR. Dr. Susan Consagra, with the Association of State and Territorial Health Officials, says many state laws are tied to what the CDC's advisory committee recommends.
While there's always been some variation state by state in vaccine laws, what we're seeing now is an amplification of that.
Given the confusion and instability on the federal level, some states are looking to other sources for their vaccine recommendations. Consagra says this can be confusing for consumers.
Talk to your provider, get your information from a trusted source around vaccines, and make sure you understand where to go and your insurance coverage as well as we navigate this changing landscape.
Later this month, state health officials will be watching closely when the CDC's revamped Vaccine Advisory Committee meets to vote on recommendations for COVID, hepatitis B, and some other vaccines. Ping Huang, NPR News.
If you ever wanted to be a bug-like creature swinging a sword, Hollow Knight might be the video game for you. Die-hard fans of this 2017 hit have waited years for its sequel, and today hordes of players crashed online storefronts, snagging their copies of that sequel, called Hollow Knight Silksong. Here's NPR's Kai McNamee.
Gamescom in Cologne, Germany is the world's largest video game convention.
Is it working? Am I live? Hi, everyone.
YouTuber Alan Ferretti Horst was there last month, live streaming from his tent on the convention campgrounds. Online, he goes by the name Blue SR, and he makes videos playing Hollow Knight. In the game, you play a knight exploring a two-dimensional world, hopping between platforms and slashing enemies. Ferretti Horst came to Gamescom for one thing, a playable demo of Hollow Knight's long-awaited sequel, Hollow Knight Silksong.
You should have seen the lines. It was crazy. There were so many people excited about it.
Even better than a demo? During the convention, the creators of the game announced Silksong would be released just 2 weeks later.
It honestly still doesn't feel real. I feel like at any moment I could pinch myself and wake up.
Zach Kazmierski runs a Reddit community dedicated to Hollow Knight. It's one of many online communities where people talk about the game, share fan art, hang out, and they've spent plenty of time waiting for Silksong. Over the years, speculation about Silksong's release whipped fans into bouts of frenzied excitement. Every year at major video game events, they would flock to the live stream and spam the chat with messages like Silksong, when?
It was a little overwhelming, to tell you the truth. People can be a little bit overzealous about this series sometimes.
People kept wondering, is this going to be the Xbox event or the Nintendo Direct where Silksong finally shows up? And as the years went on, the silence just became totally deafening.
That's Bloomberg video game reporter Jason Schreier. The game's creators, Team Cherry, were almost completely silent during the sequel's development, which Schreier says only helped fuel the intrigue and draw more players to the game. Take 2019. That year, Team Cherry announced plans for a sequel, but didn't say when they'd release it. At that point, Hollow Knight had sold around 3 million copies. But as online chatter from expectant fans grew, so did sales. Today, that number is around 15 million copies. Fans of Hollow Knight will tell you its vast world, tight controls, and haunting score make it a perfect game. Riley Johnston breaks down video game design on her YouTube channel, Juniper Dev. She says the hand-drawn art sets Hollow Knight apart.
Every time that I went to like a new space in the map, like the Crystal Peaks, Green Path, Fog Canyon, just discovering all the different sound effects, the enemies, like they build the world so well that like genuinely all you can feel is just awe.
All that awe is the work of a very small crew. Team Cherry is a tiny studio made up of only 3 full-time staff. Jason Schreier says that's really astonishing.
Especially because you have comparative games that are made by thousands of people and don't sell nearly as many copies.
Team Cherry didn't respond to my request for an interview, but they explained to Schreier that the development of Silksong was smooth. They were just quietly working on the game, taking their time with it and not letting the online excitement distract them. Now, 6 years after Team Cherry announced the sequel, fans will finally see if Hollow Knight's Silksong lives up to the hype. Kai McNamee, NPR News.
At 6:18, you're listening to All Things Considered on News 88.7. 95 Fahrenheit, 35 Celsius right now here at the UH campus. I'm David Pittman, and if you're trying to leave Galveston Island on northbound 45, it'll take about 35 minutes to get from 61st to the other side of the causeway. We had an earlier wreck that blocked all lanes for a big chunk of the 5 o'clock hour right before Highway 6. And in Montgomery County, 99 Grand Parkway eastbound still have the wreck east of Burnham Woods. It's going to be stacked up pretty much all the way back to I-45.
When I call 911, she's like, are you able to open the door for first responders? If not, they're gonna have to break it down. Now I'm in the hallway, naked. I'm a broke college student. I don't have re-hinge your door money.
Join us for stories of clean breaks. That's on the Moth Radio Hour from PRX.
That's Saturday at noon on News 88.7.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from the Elizabeth D. Rockwell Center on Ethics and Leadership, presenting How to Break Up with Your Phone, a lecture with author Catherine Price on September 18th at the University of Houston. More at uh.edu/hobby. Support comes from Avenue 360 Health and Wellness, expanding care throughout Houston with their new mobile clinic. Services include exams, preventative dental, immunizations, community education, and more. Details at avenue360.org.
Sure, the Federal Reserve in Washington gets most of the attention, but the 12 regional Fed banks play a big part in running this economy. The history of those regional banks, next time on Marketplace.
That's coming your way in 10 minutes, followed by the Daily at 7 o'clock. It'll be clear overnight with a slightly above average high of 77. 73 is where we ought to be. The average high of 93 will get up to around 94 tomorrow, but with enough humidity to make it feel like 104 at 6:20.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from Charles Schwab, offering investors choices like full-service wealth management, advice, investing, and trading on Thinkorswim. Learn more at schwab.com. From Indeed, committed to giving job listings increased visibility with relevant candidates through its sponsored jobs feature. Learn more at Indeed.com/NPR. And from the Skoll Foundation, dedicated to powering social innovators to transform the world. Learn more at skoll.org.
This is All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Ari Shapiro.
And I'm Juana Summers. It's time now for our Science News Roundup from Shortwave, NPR Science Podcast. I am joined by the show's two hosts, Regina Barber and Emily Kwong. Hi, y'all.
Hi.
Hey. So I know that, like usual, you've brought us 3 science stories that caught your attention this week. Tell us what they are.
New research that tells us more about the inside of Mars and what makes it different from Earth.
And speaking of Earth, we have a new way to recycle plastic.
And why scrolling on the toilet may not be good for you.
I have a lot of questions, but let's start with Mars, the red planet. Emily, why don't you kick us off?
So there are 2 new studies looking at this using data from NASA's InSight mission, which placed the first seismometer on Mars' surface in 2018. This seismometer collected data about Marsquakes, which is sort of a way of taking an X-ray of the planet. And now this data is giving scientists a glimpse into the planet's history to see how Mars has evolved over billions of years and how its inner structure compares to Earth.
Okay, go on. What is going on inside Mars?
So scientists used to think that the Mars core, the innermost layer, was liquid. But new research in the journal Nature shows that the core has an inner, solid core and a liquid outer core.
And that structure is similar to Earth. Our Earth's core has a solid center and liquid outer layer underneath the Earth's mantle.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, the internal structure of Mars might be a little more like Earth, according to this new study, but help me understand why this matters.
Yeah, so on Earth, the internal structure helps create a magnetic field, and that protects our atmosphere from the sun's radiation and is part of why our planet is habitable. It's important for life.
Yeah, and while Mars doesn't have a magnetic field, researchers think it did at some point in its history. So this new paper could help scientists figure out when and why the magnetic field faded.
Well, don't leave me hanging. Did they come up with an answer?
Juana wants to know now.
They still do not know. And that's where the second study out recently in the journal Science comes in. And it looks at another layer of Mars, its mantle, and that sits between its core and its crust.
Now, traditionally, people thought Mars's insides looked like a smooth layer cake. But this paper suggests Mars' mantle is chunky, like Rocky Road ice cream. Only instead of marshmallows and chocolate, it's full of remnants of collisions from the planet's past, when protoplanets and comets and asteroids crashed into Mars.
Okay, you're making me hungry, but I'm going to set that aside for a second. What does that Rocky Road structure mean for the planet?
Yeah, that's a good question. We asked one of the lead researchers, Konstantinos Haralambos. He told us that the fact that these pieces survived over billions of years suggests Mars' mantle traps heat. That slows down the cooling of the planet's core and may be part of the reason why Mars doesn't have a magnetic field.
Taken all together, this new ice cream image and these 2 papers, they fill out details about Mars, lending new clues about how planets form and what makes them suitable for life.
Right, interesting. Let's go to the next science story, which is about plastic recycling. And I know that a lot of plastic is used for packaging because I shop too much.
Yeah, so much.
Same.
Every year, the average American discards nearly 500 pounds of plastic. A lot of that gets mixed together when it is tossed. So your milk jugs go in with your yogurt cups and your snack wrappers, and it all contains different plastic chemicals.
So facilities use optical sorters or infrared scanners to sort it all out by type, which is pretty tedious and costly. In fact, less than 10% of plastic gets recycled worldwide.
But scientists at Northwestern, Purdue, and Iowa State universities have figured out a new way to potentially bypass the need for pre-sorting mixed plastic waste. And they published this work in the journal Nature Chemistry this week.
So what's the secret?
It's a nickel-based catalyst that's activated by a special powder. So when mixed with plastic waste that's heated, this catalyst actually breaks down what's known as polyolefin plastics. And polyolefins are important because they make up most of the plastic worldwide.
Sandwich bags, garbage containers, food containers, milk jugs, all of those things.
This is Tobin Marks, the senior author of this paper, and he spent much of his career making plastics.
I obviously was concerned, as I think all citizens are, about these huge amounts of plastic just being dumped in landfills, floating in the ocean.
So he thought, what if I deployed the same technique I used to make plastics, a catalyst, to take plastics apart?
His team's catalyst cuts the carbon-to-carbon bonds, transforming the plastic into oils or waxes or hydrocarbon gas, which can be upcycled into higher-value products.
Like what?
Like lubricants, fuels, and even candlesticks.
But do you think plastic facilities will really start using this catalyst?
That is a question for the industry, right? Troels Skristrup, a chemist at Aarhus University in Denmark, who is not a part of the study, said it's premature to evaluate what this catalytic system could do in the real world, but it's always a plus to present new technologies for solving our plastic problem.
All right, y'all, let's end with this story that I have been waiting for. It's about using a smartphone on the toilet.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, sitting for so long on the toilet while you're looking at like too many TikToks was, I mean, we all knew it was never going to be good for us.
For so many reasons.
And a recent study in the journal PLOS One says scrolling on your phone while in the bathroom is linked to a higher likelihood of getting hemorrhoids. Those sometimes painful swollen veins around your anus or lower rectum, specifically 46% more likely.
I still have questions. How did researchers even think to study this?
Yeah. Well, Dr. Tricia Pasricha is a neurogastroenterologist who just got curious. She sees a lot of patients who have hemorrhoids or GI issues, and she wanted to know if there was any research on what happens when you sit on the toilet too long looking at your phone.
And to my great surprise, nobody studied this.
So Tricia and her team surveyed and collected medical data from 125 healthy individuals that were getting routine colonoscopies. It's a small study.
But among these patients, they asked all these questions. People's fiber intake, if they've been pregnant, if they get constipated a lot, and if they use smartphones while on the toilet and for how long. And Tricia found that, yes, indeed, scrolling on the toilet was a predictor for hemorrhoids.
So then what's her advice for these folks?
Yeah, that was one of my top questions, and not for personal reasons at all.
Sure.
I think in one sentence, it's don't bring your smartphone into the bathroom.
Impossible.
Yeah. She said this is really hard to avoid, right? It's so comforting. So if you can avoid bringing your phone in the bathroom, set a timer. But the advice I loved the best is that she encouraged people to bring back the bathroom library, like comics, Far Side, poetry, things that are short and not designed to keep you scrolling, the way social media does.
So in addition to your bed, before you sleep, you can add the bathroom to a growing list of places and times not to doom scroll.
Oh, good. Another excuse to get my phone out of my hand. Love that for me.
Yes.
That's Emily Huang and Regina Barber from NPR's science podcast Shortwave. Subscribe now for new discoveries, everyday mysteries, and the science behind the headlines. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
The new horror movie, The Conjuring Last Rites, is out this weekend. It's part of a franchise based on Ed and Lorraine Warren, a controversial real-life couple who claimed to be demonologists. The movie views them as heroes, others not so much.
These are cases where people are in distress. And I don't think it helps to have a couple of people who have no training and no clinical background show up, tell you it's a demon, and walk away with book and movie contracts.
Hear more tomorrow on All Things Considered. Listen on your radio or try asking your smart speaker to play NPR or your local station by name.
And that name is Houston Public Media News 88.7. If you also want to try us by our call letters, KUHF, that should work as well. It's coming up on 6:29, and you've been listening to All Things Considered here on News 88.7. We're about a minute away from Marketplace, but first, out on the road, some good news in Montgomery County, or at least promising news. It's going to take a while to unwind on the eastbound side of 99, the Grand Parkway. They just cleared the wreck after Burnham Woods, and it's going to be bumper to bumper after I-45. And northbound 45 Gulf Freeway coming off of Galveston Island. That's still trying to get back up to speed for an earlier wreck right before Highway 6.
Councilmember Edward Pollard stepped up to identify funds to support public media in Houston.
Today, I'm excited to announce a contribution of $50,000 each to two pillars of our public broadcasting landscape, KTSU and Houston Public Media.
Councilman Pollard joins thousands who recognize the value of fact-based, non-biased journalism, high-quality educational content, and emergency alert communications. Learn how you can help at HoustonPublicMedia.org.
Marketplace is supported by Progressive Insurance. Customers can simplify their insurance needs and protect what's important by bundling home and auto. Learn more about bundling at progressive.com.
Well, let's see now. Trade and tariffs, the regional Federal Reserve banks, and economic data as an economist sees it. Sounds like a show to me, huh? From American Public Media, this is Marketplace.
Marketplace is supported by Bitwarden Password Manager. Bitwarden is designed to offer password security for any device at any location, securing both sensitive business information and personal accounts. Learn more at bitwarden.com. And by Avalara, providing businesses with cloud-based tools and managed services for property tax compliance. From filing returns to tracking assessments, Avalara can help. Learn more at avalara.com/property tax.
In Los Angeles, I'm Kai Rizdal. It is Thursday today, 4 September. Good as always to have you along, everybody. From the Bureau of Economic Analysis today came news of imports into this economy. Technically, the report is called International Trade in Goods and Services for the month July 2025. They were up, actually, about 6%, which, if you think about the timing, does kind of make sense. Importers in July trying to load up on inventory before most of the president's tariffs actually hit in August. But, one data point does not sufficient analysis make, as we all know, and there is other more recent data that suggests imports have been slowing down. Among them, Exhibit A, shipping costs. Container rates have been falling for 12 weeks straight now. That's according to the Drewry World Container Index. Supply-demand, of course, being the operative economic model
Caution.
there.
Please mind
Marketplace's
speed.
Justin Ho gets us going and explains what it all means.
One reason shipping costs are down is because there are just a lot of ships out there floating around. Simon Heaney with Drury Shipping Consultants says a couple years ago, when attacks in the Red Sea clogged up shipping routes, shipping companies ordered new vessels to add more capacity.
Go straight on.
We're getting a very steady flow of new ships at a time when demand growth is slower.
Heaney says demand for shipping is slowing because importers aren't bringing in as many products from overseas.
Because of the tariff story, a lot of cargo was brought forward to beat the deadlines. Once those warehouses are full, your ordering slows up.
And that sluggish demand has been showing up in other parts of supply chains.
We're seeing, because of the slowdown in imports in August, a real softening of the sort of upstream freight market.
That's Zach Rogers, professor of supply chain management at Colorado State University. He says prices have been falling for many of the transportation services that are connected to ports.
So this is long haul, over-the-road trucks. It's also rail.
And Rogers says that's a sign that imports are going to stay weak through at least the end of the year.
Because essentially what it looks like is that most of the stuff that retailers are going to need for the holiday season is already in the United States.
But the slowdown in shipping costs isn't only a sign that importers have already purchased the goods they need.
That could be reflective of the fact that they're anticipating that their buyers are going to have a lot less demand going into the rest of the year.
That's Megan Schoenberger, senior economist with KPMG. She says consumers have already been pulling back this year.
We've seen that sort of in the GDP, that in the first half there was a pretty large slowdown from the second half of last year.
And Schoenberger says there are plenty of signs that consumer spending will keep slowing down this quarter and maybe into the next.
It's not as if the consumers are flashing red, but there are some metrics that are flashing yellow. Consumers are pushing back against price hikes. There are particular signs of stress in low-income households, and that's starting to creep up into the middle-income households as well.
Schoenberger says that slowdown will continue once the cost of tariffs pushes consumer prices even higher. I'm Justin Ho for Marketplace.
On Wall Street today, honestly, traders seemed kind of optimistic ahead of tomorrow's all-important August unemployment report. We will have the details when we do the numbers. There's a whole lot going on this week, Fed-wise. There's President Trump trying to fire Lisa Cook from the Board of Governors and take control of the central bank. We're waiting on next steps from the court on that one. Stephen Myron had his confirmation hearing today. He's the White House economist who is Trump's pick to replace Adriana Kugler, the Fed governor who resigned unexpectedly last month. But there is more to the central bank than just the 7 people who sit on the Board of Governors. Every time the Federal Open Market Committee meets, that's the group that actually sets the interest rate that the Fed controls, 5 of the 12 people on the FOMC are presidents of the regional Federal Reserve banks. Most of the time, when we talk about Fed presidents, it's because I'm interviewing one of them or because the Beige Book, the 8 times a year collection of regional economic anecdotes, has just come out like it did yesterday. Here's the thing, though. With so much of the Fed focus being in Washington, this does kind of seem like an important moment to talk about those other people who get a vote and the ways that they help shape monetary policy. And to do that, we've got to go back to the Federal Reserve Act of 1913.
At the time, remember, lending was very localized and deposit taking was very localized.
Halem Anderson is a research economist, used to be with the Bank Policy Institute. And back in 1913, she says, Congress wanted a central banking system where interest rates could vary by region.
It made sense that each region would have own a regional bank that can accommodate economic conditions of that place.
Think about it for a second. The economy in, say, New York was really different from the economy of St. Louis or San Francisco or Dallas. So Congress created 12 regional banks in big population centers, based on the 1910 census, by the way, if you're wondering how that distribution worked. And those banks got to set their own monetary policy until the 1930s.
During the Great Depression, there was no centralized policy. Each district was doing its own thing. And the policymakers thought maybe we should make it more consistent across the different regions.
Which is how we got the Board of Governors and more centralized central bank power in Washington, as Halem said. You fast forward to today, and regional banks do still get a vote on interest rates, yes, but they do a bunch of other stuff, too. Jeremy Piger is a professor of economics at the University of Oregon. Back in the day, though, he in turn worked for both the Federal Reserve Board in Washington and the St. Louis Fed.
They were actually quite different positions.
Economists at the Board of Governors are there mostly to support the chair and the other 6 governors. At the regional banks, though?
There's more time given to production of economic research that is meant to be published in scholarly journals.
And the banks do tend to carve out niches for themselves. The Philly Fed, for example, focuses on publishing consumer finance research. Cleveland makes daily inflation forecasts. San Francisco?
It's cash services.
Galena Hale is an economics professor at UC Santa Cruz. She worked at the San Francisco Fed for 14 years. The research the regional banks put out helped contribute to the Fed's overall understanding of the economy, region by region, and centralized as well. Regional Fed presidents are chosen by independent boards of directors at those regional banks.
We had the chief marketing officer of Costco, CEO of Panda Express, CEO of Alaska Airlines.
They make their pick. It goes to the Board of Governors in Washington, which then gets to make the final choice.
Regional Fed presidents don't need to go through congressional approval. They're just approved by the Board of Governors. So there is this insulation, but it's not impermeable.
Speaking hypothetically here, if you were to have a Board of Governors highly compromised in people's assessment of their independence, then the Reserve Bank presidents become even more important in that just the basic math of FOMC decisions, they can provide a counterbalance to the Board of Governors.
That counterbalance, though, that insulation, is going to be not hypothetically tested in February when all 12 regional bank presidents are by statute up for reappointment by the Board of Governors, a board that President Trump is trying right now to take control of. Layoffs are usually something people kind of whisper about, like, he got let go last week, or she just lost her job. But layoffs are in the headlines now more than they usually are because the job market, as we've been telling you, is getting kind of meh. So for the latest installment of our series, My Economy, a writer who is trying to end that stigma through her Substack.
My name is Melanie Ehrenkrantz. I am the creator of Laid Off, the coolest place on the internet to talk about being laid off. I come from journalism, and so I am not a stranger to layoffs. I have witnessed a lot of my endlessly cool, smart, talented friends lose their jobs, and I realized there wasn't a lot looking deeper into the experience of the layoff, looking into what was going on in that person's life at the time. And I was like, I want to start Laid Off. I want to talk to people. It's going to be a newsletter. Let's just see how this goes. When all of the news around federal worker cuts were in the headlines, I pretty quickly knew these were people that I wanted to talk to. And after I posted just the first interview with a federal worker, a lot more people came out of the woodwork. And I think seeing the response to those initial stories really emboldened people to want to share what happened to them. Given that my audience is primarily people experiencing job loss, I try to be really mindful about how I'm monetizing the actual content, and that's why all the interviews are always free. Brands can sponsor a newsletter, and baked into the cost of the sponsorship, 10 readers are treated to coffee on the brand. They get digital gift cards to a local coffee shop. So really just trying to figure out ways that are true to the mission. So I am making money. It is definitely a side hustle and what I imagine it will be for the foreseeable future, but that is okay because it's a project I'm really passionate about. I definitely think there's still a lot of shame around the experience, but I think that's changing, especially as more and more people are sharing what's happening to them. I get a lot of emails still of people who find the newsletter and say, I've never told anyone that this happened, or like I maybe just told my partner. I felt like it was a personal failure, but they're now seeing, I think, through Laid Off, but also through LinkedIn posts and through people being a lot more vocal about what they're going through. I think that is a step towards eradicating the shame around the experience and really showing people that it's not a personal failure and has nothing to do with their value as a person or a worker.
Melanie Ehrenkrantz there. She lives here in Southern California. You know, this series, I know I say this all the time, but it's true. It just does not work without you. So whether you are staying the course or making a pivot, tell us about it. Marketplace.org/myeconomy. Coming up.
That's not so bad where I keep, track of my receipts and look at my monthly inflation figures.
How an economist does economic data. But first, let's us do the numbers. Dow Industrial's up 350 today, about 0.75%, finished at 45,621. That's 45,621. The Nasdaq added 209 points, about 1%, 21,707. The S&P 500 gained 53 points, 0.8%, 65.2. Goldman Sachs wants a slice of Americans' 401k, so it's investing up to $1 billion in T. Rowe Price. That'll give the latter's clients a chance to put some of their retirement savings into the former's private investment vehicles. Now that the Trump administration is making that possible, T. Rowe Price added 5 0.8%. Goldman Sachs bagged about 2.5%. Today, bonds up, yield on the 10-year T-note down 4.16%. You're listening to Marketplace.
The Numbers is supported by Odoo.com, your entire business on one platform. Marketplace is supported by Mercury. Mercury is a fintech that helps entrepreneurs do more with their money. They offer banking, credit cards, invoicing, and more all in one place. Learn more at Mercury.com. And by Solidigm. Today's AI ambitions require a different approach to storage. Solidigm offers solid-state storage solutions optimized for AI with higher capacities, greater speed, and energy efficiency. StorageForAI.com.
6:45, you're listening to News 88.7. And on the freeways, our latest problem is on the East Loop, northbound 610, right around Clinton. We've got a wreck in the left lane.
The question is, has the judge in this case changed the rules of the game enough to give one of the rookie players enough space on the field to compete with Google? Or have the rules changed too little and Google will just play the game again and win again?
I'm Rachel Abrams. That's Today on the Daily from the New York Times.
It's coming your way next at 7 o'clock here on News 88.7. Support comes from Laporte CPAs and Business Advisors, an independent accounting and business advisory firm serving clients for more than 75 years. With 190 employees across offices in Houston, New Orleans, and other locations. More information at laporte.com.
Support comes from Moody Center for the Arts, opening
Turn
their
left.
fall 2025 exhibition, Biomorph, on September 5th from 6 to 8 p.m. 7 international artists explore the intersection of biology, society, and technology. Details at moody.rice.edu.
This is Marketplace. I'm Kai Risdahl. The Federal Reserve published the Beige Book yesterday. We talked about that a little bit. Tariffs being mentioned 100 times in its 51 pages. Overall, though, most of the 12 regional Fed banks reported, and this is a quote, little or no change in economic activity. But there was a shift in one particular corner of this economy that is of note, and that corner would be lending. Nearly every district reported a modest rise in loan activity. Daniel Ackerman looked into who's getting those loans and what it might mean.
The surveys that go into the Beige Book aren't exactly scientific, so Charles Calamiris, professor emeritus at Columbia Business School, doesn't read too much into the rising loan demand. Still, he says,
it shows that the economy hasn't collapsed.
And small businesses are doing their share, says David Schiff of FTI Consulting.
One of the largest upticks that we've seen in this last quarter has been in the really small community banks, which tends to be small businesses going for the loans.
That rings true for Robert James II, CEO of Carver Financial Corporation, which owns community banks in Georgia and Alabama.
Just in the past few days, we started to see some promising small business loan applications, healthcare-related projects, community development projects like affordable housing.
The reason for these new loan applications is what James calls the settling in factor, after months of chaotic policy from the White House.
The business community is starting to get a little bit more comfortable with where the economy is going to be going from a policy perspective. And so some of those projects that were sitting on the sidelines are starting to come back around.
But not everyone is off the sidelines just yet. Brad Bolton is CEO of Community Spirit Bank in northern Alabama, where he often lends to businesses in the timber industry to help them buy new machinery.
We're talking about bulldozers, skidders, log loaders, that kind of stuff.
And he's seen a slowdown in these loan applications.
It seems like everyone is just trying to make use of what equipment that they have.
Bolton says his clients don't want to finance anything new until borrowing costs come down.
That's the main thing that I hear right now is unless they just absolutely have to replace something because of age, repair, or just breakdown in general, most folks are just saying, I'm going to wait a few months and see what interest rates do.
And if interest rates fall later this year, Bolton expects a surge of new loan applications. I'm Daniel Ackerman for Marketplace.
Jobs Day, as regular listeners to this program know, is a big one for economic journalists. So the arrival of the August jobs report tomorrow is going to be a big deal, especially since the kind of downer one that was July. But it's not just us who are glued to our screens awaiting the release of the newest economic data. There are people in all sorts of industries who rely on those measurements. So we got Nicole Survey on the phone. She's an economist at Wells Fargo, and she's going to walk us through what it's like for her on a big economic data day. In this case, the July Consumer Price Index that came out just a couple of weeks ago. Nicole, it's good to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
Let's go back to Tuesday morning. And you get out of bed at whatever time you get out of bed. Is your first thought, ooh, CPI comes out today?
Yes.
Get ready to
Not coffee, tea, I have to walk the dog, but CPI?
It's CPI comes out today, therefore I should probably get a coffee on the way to work.
And what do you, as you approach getting this data, right? 8:30 in the morning Washington time, 5:30 for those of us on the West Coast. What's your thought process going in?
So in my role as an economist, I make sure that I know what my expectations are. And then when the data actually hits at 8:30, first thing I'm doing is Googling, like everyone else, BLS, CPI, pulling up this
you don't
indicator.
You don't have it bookmarked?
I don't actually.
Okay, pro tip, bookmark it. I'm just saying. All right, so here's what I want you to do, if you don't mind. Share your screen with me, and let's pull up that CPI report. And I want you to sort of walk me through, first of all, how you scan this thing.
Yes. So once you Google BLS CPI and for the bookmarking, you come at the Consumer Price Index landing page here. And then on the BLS website, you can look at the report in different ways, but I guess I'm also old school here. I always scroll straight down and I do the PDF version.
And then turn
because that gives you all of the tables in one go. And so if you're control F-ing through this report, you can find everything because all the tables will be listed in the PDF.
Is that how you do it? You basically control F?
Yes, if I'm looking for a particular series. So for instance, what's been interesting to us, or what we've been keeping an eye on, is some import heavy items because we know that they're subject to tariffs and we want to see if those tariffs are being passed on to consumers via higher selling prices. And so you can kind of cherry pick a little bit and look through the report and try to find some of those items. So one that we've been looking at is household furnishings, for instance. So I'll do that.
Right. Okay, so you go through, you do your control F-ing and all of that. How long on CPI day do you spend in these data tables?
So in my job, we have indicator reports that we release. And so what we do is we get the press release, we try to digest it. I would say I probably spend usually about 10 minutes looking at table 1 and then table 2. And then we start to write a report. So I overhear Sarah House, Michael Puglisi, and I, we share the coverage of inflation. We write a report, the three of us all together, and try to get it published for distribution within an hour. So usually that's how I'm digesting this.
You're banging it out. You got a little bit of a deadline.
Yes.
Yeah. Wells Fargo has, I'm sure, reams and reams and reams of data at its disposal in-house, right? Its own data. What does the BLS do for you that your own stuff can't do?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think this speaks to not just the BLS, but all government data. You also have the Bureau of Economic Analysis. Right. So as you said, Wells Fargo, massive bank, we're a GSIB. We're one of those globally systematically important banks. And so we do have access to a lot of data. But we don't have access to all consumers, all businesses. Whereas the government is in a better position to have a sample that really, truly represents most of businesses and consumers better than even a large institution like Wells Fargo can.
Setting aside then for a second I don't want to play this down at all because it's really serious, but the brouhaha over the politicization of government economic data. There are well-known problems with data collection now, right? Survey response rates and lack of resources and all that stuff. Where is that on your list of things to be worried about?
Pretty high. If I were to say top 10, it's probably rising to 3 too. I think especially with the payroll report that we got a few weeks ago, you saw that the size of the revision, that was shocking. And if we look underneath the details, we know it's because you see the survey response rates are falling. And the natural conclusion from that is maybe we're not surveying well. And so my immediate gut reaction is maybe I should not take that initial preliminary estimate for July literally, because we know that perhaps the preliminary quality is not great because of these issues with surveying.
Does that give you a little bit of feeling?
It does, especially when in my world, we serve institutional clients who are trading on this information the minute it drops. Yeah. And so that's what makes it very difficult is when you're kind of grappling with what do I think the underlying trend of employment growth actually is, and when is that actually going to show up in the data?
So let me ask you this then, as a sort of a way to bring this home. Are you able to, when you are out at your local Piggly Wiggly shopping for eggs or milk or whatever it is, can you separate all this data that you see from sort of how you think about your daily life?
I don't think I can, honestly. I'm so deep in this now. When I'm out, that's not so bad where I keep, track of my receipts and look at my monthly inflation figures.
Nicole's Rudy's personal inflation figure, right?
But I do notice it. So, for instance, I remember in the CPI report before this one, I knew that avocado prices were just through the roof because I was making a guacamole, and I was so glad to see it validated when I saw the report. Things like that, where I will make note of prices that I'm noticing when I'm at the grocery store, and I'll go ahead and check it when I get the CPI report the next month.
The economy is real life, people. Nicole Survey at Wells Fargo. Thank you, Nicole.
Thanks.
On Tuesday, September 9th at 4 p.m. Pacific, How We Survive is hosting a live webinar, Is Climate Change an Economic Crisis? Presented by Marketplace with support from Odoo. Details at marketplace.org/climate.
This final note on the way out today, it comes to us from the Senate Banking Committee's hearing this morning for the aforementioned Stephen Miron, President Trump's nominee to the Fed's Board of Governors. Miron, as I said, already has a job. He's the chair of the White House Council of Economic Advisors. It's a subject that came up when Rhode Island Democrat Jack Reed took his turn asking questions.
You're a member of the Council of Economic Advisors. If you're confirmed, will you resign from the council?
Thank you, Senator. I have received advice from counsel that what is required is an unpaid leave of absence from the Council of Economic Advisors, and so considering the term for which I'm being nominated is a little bit more than 4 months, that is what I will be taking. As long as that is the advice of counsel, I will follow the law.
It is really important to be really clear about what this means. Miron will still be a White House employee, working for a president who's been vocal about wanting lower interest rates when, as seems likely, Miron is also going to be voting on interest rates. Conflicts of interest do not seem to come much more starkly than that. Our daily production team includes Andy Corbin, Nicholas Guillon, Maria Hollenhorst, Iru Ekpanobi, Sarah Leeson, Sean McHenry, and Sophia Terenzio. I'm Kai Risdall. We will see you tomorrow, everybody. This is 8 p.m.
Turn right.
And at before 7 on the evening before Friday, here on your NPR station, News 87. Last look at the drive home finds that we still have a wreck on the East Loop, northbound direction of 610, right after Clinton. Got a couple of floodplains taken up, but no significant delay in that area. 94 with the heat index of only 95 right now here at the UH campus. The dew point only 63 degrees. That's well below the 70-degree line between, it's not so bad, and why do I even live here? It's going to change, though, tomorrow as more humid air moves in from the south. Tomorrow's forecast high of 94 with the heat index right around 104. And then we have some scattered showers coming in Saturday. Showers are likely on Sunday with high of only 88. Something to look forward to there. This is your NPR station, KUHF Houston News 88.7, a service of the University of Houston. I'm David Pittman. Thank you for letting us be a part of your life this afternoon. We'll do it all over again tomorrow afternoon at 2 at 7 o'clock.
But there's a catch. The judge said that Google doesn't have to share a lot of the data it uses to rank the popularity of those pages. The judge said no go. He said this was an overreach, that the government was asking for something so aggressive that wasn't justified under the law set in previous antitrust cases.
I'm Rachel Abrams. That's coming up on The Daily from the New York Times.
The Daily is supported by BetterHelp, committed to helping clients with issues ranging from relationship challenges and goal setting to grief and depression. Learn more at betterhelp.com/public for everything you need to know about the most important stories of the day. You're listening to The Daily from the New York Times, distributed by American Public Media. APM produces and distributes programs that entertain and engage audiences everywhere.
Live from NPR News, I'm Janine Hurst. The Trump administration has begun the groundwork for military assistance with ICE operations in Chicago. NPR's Quill Lawrence reports operations would be staged out of Great Lakes Naval Station.
A U.S. official who is not authorized to speak publicly confirmed to NPR that the Department of Homeland Security has requested assistance from the Pentagon for ICE enforcement and removal operations in the Chicago metropolitan area. The request is for logistical help and use of facilities at Naval Station Great Lakes, about 30 miles north of the city. President Trump has recently spoken of sending National Guard troops to fight crime in Chicago, and he said he's prepared to do it without getting approval from state or city officials. Chicago's mayor and Illinois' governor, both Democrats, have said that it would be unconstitutional for President Trump to send troops into the city. Quill Lawrence, NPR News.
Northwestern University's president is stepping down amid a funding battle with the Trump administration. NPR's Sequoia Carrillo has more.
Michael Schill announced his resignation after 3 years as president of Northwestern. In his statement to students and faculty, he acknowledged the challenges of the last few years and said that, quote, difficult problems remain, particularly at the federal level. This summer, Northwestern moved to eliminate hundreds of jobs. It was a drastic step to try to offset some of the loss from the Trump administration's freezing of almost $800 million in federal funding in April. Last year, Schill faced scrutiny from members of Congress when he testified alongside other college presidents in a hearing about anti-Semitism on campuses. Sequoia Carrillo, NPR News.
In Los Angeles, Southern California, Edison has been named in a lawsuit by the federal government for its role in January's Eaton fire. As Steve Futterman reports, that blaze destroyed more than 4,000 homes and was responsible for at least 19 deaths.
The lawsuit puts the blame directly on Southern California Edison for both the Eaton fire and a fire east of LA in 2022.
The big message today is that Edison is responsible.
The acting U.S. attorney in Los Angeles, Bill Saley, says Edison failed to safely maintain its equipment.
But for Edison's negligence, these fires would not have started.
Keep left.
And they've got to change the way they do business.
In the case of the Eaton fire, it's believed sparks from a transmitter triggered the blaze. So far, Edison has acknowledged only that its equipment may have been involved. The lawsuit is seeking tens of millions of dollars in damages for costs incurred by the government. For NPR News, I'm Steve Futterman in Los Angeles.
U.S. futures contracts trading mostly higher at this hour. Dow futures are unchanged. NASDAQ futures are up nearly 0.2%. You're listening to NPR News from Washington. Food conglomerate Campbell's is the latest company saying it plans to stop using synthetic food dyes. Campbell says it's long been transitioning most of its products to natural dyes, but that it will make the full shift next year. NPR's Alina Selyuk has more.
This is not a story of Campbell's soup, but more of its crackers and cookies, brands including Lance and Archway. Plus, the vegetable juice V8 Splash will switch to natural dyes using annatto seed and purple carrot juice concentrate. Campbell's boasts that its goldfish crackers have for years been dyed with beets and paprika. Major food manufacturers have faced pressure from Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., plus some states and many shoppers in general wanting foods without artificial dyes. So far, company commitments have been voluntary without federal legal enforcement, but coming from some of the biggest brands, including Kraft Heinz, Nestle, and Pepsi's Lay's and Tostitos chips. Alina Selyuk, NPR News.
An 18th century painting that's been missing for some 80 years has finally been recovered. The portrait of a lady belonged to a prominent Jewish art collector before it was stolen by the Nazis in World War II. But it was spotted in a recent real estate listing of a property for sale in Argentina. Dutch journalists made the discovery as they investigated a high-ranking official from Germany's Third Reich who fled to Argentina after World War II. I'm Janine Herbst, and you're listening to NPR News from Washington.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Avalara,
providing businesses with cloud-based tools and managed services for property tax compliance. From filing returns to tracking assessments. Learn more at Avalara.com/property tax.
From the New York Times, I'm Rachel Abrams, and this is The Daily. For decades, the government has struggled with how to police monopolies in the tech industry. And this week, a landmark ruling in a case against Google marked the most aggressive attempt in the modern era to level the playing field. Today, my colleague David McCabe on who won, who lost, and what this means for the race to dominate artificial intelligence. It's Thursday, September 4th.
Keep right.
So, David, a year ago, a federal judge decided that Google had broken the law to maintain its dominance over search, that basically it had illegally maintained its monopoly. And since then, everyone has been waiting to see what the punishment could be, because the punishment in this case could have enormous implications for the tech industry. And here we are this week, the decision comes out, the punishment is clear, and it seems like a slap on the wrist.
Yeah, so on Tuesday, a little bit after 4 p.m., I get a message from someone we work with that just said, it's dropped. And I knew immediately what they were talking about. And we start making our way through this ruling. It's 223 pages long. But it becomes clear within minutes that this is really a win for Google and a blow to the government's efforts over now 2 different presidents to rein in the power of Silicon Valley. Google had avoided the harshest penalties in this case. It had not been broken up as the government had asked, so it was not forced to sell Chrome, its popular web browser. It was forced to share some of its data and its search results with its rivals, but on terms that did not require it to hand over all of its secret sauce. And it was telling that despite the fact that Google was being mandated to do some of these things, its stock price actually jumped after the ruling.
Well, I mean, earlier I mentioned this felt like a slap on the wrist. Like, that doesn't seem like the worst fate that could befall a company as big as Google, which is, worth trillions of dollars, something like that?
Yeah, and especially after just a year ago, he issued a ruling that declared in no uncertain terms that they were a monopolist and they had acted illegally, right? That was a big ruling and a loss for Google.
Right. So how does this judge go from declaring that Google is illegally protecting its monopoly to basically delivering a penalty that is so lenient or benign, however you want to call it, that the stock price actually jumps?
The answer to that question has a lot to do with artificial intelligence, which has, for the first time in decades, called into question whether Google will own the future of how people look for information online. So it starts in 2020. So the first Trump administration had decided that they were going to investigate concerns about the power of the biggest tech companies.
Right, I remember that.
Yeah, not just Google, but Amazon and Apple.
Mm-hmm.
And they said that Google had amassed and maintained a monopoly over the search business. They said that its behavior had crushed its competition, made it hard for even big companies like Microsoft to build a search engine that could match Google's dominance. They said that it had led Google to make an inferior product. And they said that ultimately this had hurt consumers.
Because they were getting access to an inferior product, or what was the harm exactly?
The harm was that Google, now outside of a competitive marketplace, was able to make an inferior product, and ultimately that consumers had less choice, right? That if they didn't like how Google was, say, collecting their personal data, that they couldn't go somewhere else that was as effective at giving them the answers that they needed from the internet.
That's actually really interesting, because I think when we think of antitrust cases, we normally think of like a price harm, like consumers are getting harmed because they're paying more for such and such product. But here, it's that the product that they're not even paying for is inferior, and also that it's about their data and their privacy, which feels a little bit unusual.
Yeah, you're right. Antitrust law often in the last many decades has looked at, is there a price increase for consumers? And Google ultimately has a cost of $0.
So what were the arguments on both sides of this case?
So at the heart of the government's case were payments that Google has made for many years to companies like Apple and Mozilla that make web browsers, and to companies like Samsung that make smartphones, to basically make its search engine the automatically selected search engine that comes up when you open your phone or you enter a query into the top of your web browser. And these payments amounted ultimately in some cases to billions of dollars. In 2021, Google paid $26.3 billion as part of these deals. And the government said that that set in motion a pernicious flywheel effect. Google paid for the Prime placement, which meant more people searched on Google, which meant Google had more data about what people are searching for, which they used to make their product better, which in turn made it more likely that Google would get the Prime placement.
Straight on.
And that effectively, this pernicious flywheel spun and spun and spun and blocked out even big companies who were trying to compete in search.
This feels like an argument that actually serves both sides of this lawsuit.
Well, exactly. Google said, people choose us because we are better. They argued that they have invested again and again in making search the best product it can be, and that people chose not because Google was making these payments, not because it was the automatically selected search engine in their web browser, but because it had simply won on the merits.
It seems worth noting here that this case seems to be existential in some ways, and it feels like that is a lot of power to put in the hands of this one judge who basically has like the future of Google in his hands and his hands alone.
That's right. And once he ruled in 2024 that Google had abused its power, had illegally maintained a monopoly, that pressure only increased because he had to figure out what to do about it. And that's a question that didn't just have implications for Google. It had implications for the entire industry, for the entire internet, and everybody who used the internet. And it seemed as though he might be poised to do something that would radically disrupt the technology industry.
Right.
And that was really crystallized for me in the closing arguments of this second phase of the trial, the remedies phase. So the judge in this case, Amit Mehta of the district court in Washington, he's very careful, and he's had 3 weeks of testimony, almost like a second trial. And then he does closing arguments. For a full day, he just drilled into these lawyers about the big picture issues in the case, but also about really small questions. And it just, in some ways, deciding that Google had broken the law was the simple part, right? It was a clear legal question. It was about basically these contracts. And now the questions before him had multiplied significantly.
Basically, it's like it was much easier and simpler to decide that they had broken the law than it was to figure out what to do about it.
That's right. And fundamentally, there's a reason for that. The first phase of this trial was about the past. The second stage was about the future. And the future of finding information on the internet is murkier than ever. While this battle was playing out in the courtroom, there was a different battle playing out in Silicon Valley between titans like Google and smaller startups to dominate what had become an AI boom. And ultimately, the fight outside of the courtroom made its way into the courtroom. And the judge in this case had to adjust to this new reality. And ultimately, it changed the course of the case.
We'll be right back.
The Daily is supported by Seed. Seed's DSO1 is a 24-strain 2-in-1 probiotic and prebiotic, engineered to survive digestion, support healthy regularity, and promote whole body health. Learn more at seed.com/public. For everything you need to know about the most important stories of the day, you're listening to The Daily from the New York Times, distributed by American Public Media. APM produces and distributes programs that entertain and engage audiences everywhere.
Houston Public Media provides a free, essential, and trusted public service to everyone in Southeast Texas. The generosity of our Affinity Council Committee enables us to bring inspiration, insight, and connection through public media. Sandy and Terry Anderson, Connolly Foundation, Laney Gordon and David Mintzberg, Amy and Stephen Koch, Dr. Maya Sheese and Dr. Donald Maloney, Stephen Van Dalen. Thank you.
Typically what I've done recently is I put on an episode of Milk Street Radio and I just stir and stir and stir.
And then
Hi, I'm Christopher Kimball. On my show, Milk Street Radio, we want to be your companion in the kitchen. Join us each week for fascinating food stories, answers to all of your culinary mysteries, and recipes that will change the way you cook.
Milk Street Radio, Sundays at 1 p.m. on News 88.7.
This is The Daily. I'm Rachel Abrams. Back to my conversation with David McCabe about a landmark antitrust ruling that could shape the future of the tech industry and its race to dominate artificial intelligence. So, David, how is it that AI became so central to the outcome of this case?
Yeah. So when this case was filed in 2020, people probably had a general understanding that the data that Google had was valuable not just for search, but for the development of artificial intelligence. Then that theoretical idea turned into reality. In November of 2022, as this case is barreling towards trial, OpenAI releases ChatGPT. And money starts pouring into this space. Companies start investing in the construction of data centers and other infrastructure that's required for this technology. Venture capitalists start funding more and more of these startups. And it is exactly at this moment that this case, which is about how, for a decade, information had worked online, goes to trial.
Can you just explain a little bit more? What does the data that you're talking about have to do with Google's efforts with AI, and what the remedy should be for whether it's legally enforcing a monopoly?
So Google Search is built on reams and reams of data and information. These large language models ingest a ton of information, a ton of text, so that they can then generate these responses to your questions. And so suddenly, there is a question about whether or not the advantage that Google has had and maintained in search can basically transmute into an advantage and dominance in artificial intelligence. But of course, that hasn't really happened yet. Google really is under challenge from companies like OpenAI and Perplexity. They have their own chatbot, Gemini, but it is not the dominant chatbot. And we know these products. There's Claude, there's Grok, there's ChatGPT.
And we should just note here that the New York Times has sued ChatGPT's parent company, OpenAI, and one of its investors, Microsoft, claiming copyright infringement of news content related to these AI systems. And the two companies have denied the suit's claims. But please continue.
That's right. And consumers have started to change their behavior because of these chatbots. They're now using them like they might have used a search engine. They're asking it questions that they might have previously asked Google. And this transformation is starting to play out as this case gets underway, but it doesn't come up in the first phase of the trial.
The first phase being when the judge says, yes, I've determined that you're acting illegally.
That's right. But as soon as he triggered the second phase of the trial, the how do I fix this phase of the trial, suddenly he has to face this transformation of the tech industry head on.
How so?
Because now Google could come into the courtroom and say, look, the rise of these AI products proves that the market is working, that you do not need to make some radical intervention. And on the flip side, the government came into his courtroom and said, if you do not act aggressively, Google will use the tactics it used to illegally protect its monopoly in search and use them to monopolize and dominate artificial intelligence.
What is the judge's actual remedy here?
I would think of this in two different buckets.
Okay.
Remember the deals that Google did with Apple, and Mozilla, and Samsung to be that automatic search engine that comes up in your browser or your smartphone?
Yes, I do.
So this is at the heart of the case.
Okay.
And I think it's something that a lot of people thought the judge would ban outright because it was so central to the government's case, to the monopoly that he had found that Google had illegally maintained. But he takes a slightly different tactic. He bars Google from entering into those deals in some cases, most notably when they are exclusive, but he does not ban them from paying for that great real estate entirely.
So what does that mean? That Apple could just be like, okay, sure, we'll take your $20 billion and you can be the main search engine when somebody opens up their browser, but we're also going to have DuckDuckGo?
This is a big question. What is a non-exclusive default? It would seem that by the nature of a default, there is only one, right? But it was, for example, discussed during the trial that Apple could offer a different default in the normal browsing mode and in the private browsing mode, right? You could imagine that they would install a privacy-focused search engine as the default in incognito mode. So perhaps that is an example of a non-exclusive default, but where the rubber will hit the road on this part of the remedies is exactly how these two things that seem like they might be in conflict resolve.
Okay, so you mentioned there were two buckets. Sounds like that's one bucket.
The second bucket is requiring Google to share some of the data that makes it powerful.
Okay.
They will be required to syndicate their search results to quote-unquote qualified competitors. Essentially, that a qualified competitor to Google could display Google's search results, which are seen as very high quality, rather than their own maybe inferior search results, right? Erasing that quality advantage. Now, the government didn't get everything they wanted there because Google's going to be able to do so basically on the terms of commercial agreements that they already have to do this. So it's not a huge change for them because they already offer deals like this, but of course now they're being required by a court to offer them. The second part of sharing what makes Google Google is they are required to give those qualified competitors the sort of top level of what is called the search index.
I have no idea what that is.
Yeah, it's a kind of wonky term, but it basically means the corpus of web pages and information that make up Google results. And so they have to hand that over to rivals who have said that it's very hard to build your own search index. And so this was this kind of insurmountable advantage that only Google had. But there's a catch. The judge said that Google doesn't have to share a lot of the data it uses to rank the popularity of those pages, the kind of one layer down that they use to make really quality results.
Wait, that would seem like it's sort of the secret sauce, as you mentioned, to Google, right? Like the whole point of using Google is that you get the search results you want immediately, like on the top page.
Yeah, and ultimately the judge did mandate sharing of some data like that, but not all of what the government asked for.
But as you mentioned earlier, all this to say, he's not actually breaking up Google, which was one of the things that they were really worried about, right? Like he's not forcing them to spin off Chrome or Android products or anything like that.
That's right. And this was like the biggest ask that the government made, that Google be forced to spin off Chrome. It's a wildly popular web browser. It's used by billions of people around the world. And potentially, if competition didn't improve after the remedies, that the court be allowed to make them spin off Android, their smartphone operating system. And the logic behind this was that those are both places where Google is able to absorb search queries, right? People use the Chrome web browser to search for information through Google. And so the idea was it was a source of web traffic, which was really valuable to Google. The judge said no go. He said this was an overreach, that the government was asking for something so aggressive that wasn't justified under the law set in previous antitrust cases.
You know, as we talked about, it's a really unusual position for a judge to be in, to have to make such a huge decision while this whole technological transformation is underway in the background. And I'm just curious if he ever addressed that or if that came up for you at all during the reporting.
Yeah, so in many ways, this is the broader framing of this ruling. He says, I'm not an expert in search engines. I'm not an expert in artificial intelligence. He says it's not a judge's forte to look into a crystal ball and tell the future. And where that ultimately led him was this place. He said, a court needs to apply remedies like this with humility, and that's what I've done. And that logic led him to this pretty measured decision.
So it sort of seems like this AI boom is the reason, in part, why the judge essentially gave them something that feels like a slap on the wrist, to a lot of people at least.
He said that it was a motivating factor in how he reached his decision. And he said that the explosion of these AI chatbots could create companies that could compete with Google on the merits. Basically, that perhaps Google's financial might, when met with a real challenge from an innovative company, would not be enough to ensure their dominance.
Which makes me just sort of wonder about where consumers fit into all of this and how consumers are likely, if at all, going to feel the results of this ruling or the remedy that the judge is recommending.
Yeah, and I don't know that consumers will see an impact from this immediately. Google is almost certain to appeal this underlying liability decision. So this will probably be mired in the courts for a long time, which could very well lead to the remedies being paused while that is being hashed out. Then the remedies themselves are not immediately about the consumer experience. They don't mandate, for example, a choice screen, which is a wonky term for basically a screen that pops up on your smartphone and says, which search engine do you want? That's something consumers would see immediately. That's not the direction the judge went.
Right.
And so instead, the question will be, does this sort of basket of changes shift the arc of the technology industry enough that maybe several years from now, consumers maybe do see more innovative products that compete with Google, that offer them that experience of finding information online in new and different ways, and ultimately allow companies that produce those products to really thrive, despite Google's size and might.
So it sounds like there could be downstream effects of this case that are unpredictable that consumers could feel.
There could be. And to understand how, it's helpful to look to the past. So more than 2 decades ago, the federal government sued Microsoft. This was the last big tech antitrust case to get this far. over allegations that Microsoft had hurt competition when it came to personal computers and internet browsers. They were battling with, I don't know if you remember Netscape.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. And ultimately, the remedies in that case were not dissimilar from the remedies in this Google case. But there has been a persistent argument that the fact of that scrutiny was enough to make Microsoft afraid of its own shadow, precisely at a time when the internet was enabling a new generation of startups.
Such as Google,
such as Google. And that as a result, Microsoft was not as aggressive in competing against Google, and that case opened the door just enough for Google to become the company it is today. And that is one of the big questions. It was clear throughout this trial that Google has learned from the Microsoft experience.
So in the Microsoft case, the biggest effect of that was not necessarily the actual outcome, but the fear of God that the government put into this company that then made it behave differently with its competitors. And I just sort of wonder how you're thinking about the government's attempts to regulate an industry it has struggled to get its arms around throughout multiple administrations, Democrat and Republican.
I mean, this decision is a blow to those efforts. And it's striking to me because the Justice Department undertook a monumental effort to bring this case to trial. These rulings are landmark decisions. And still, when people looked at the ruling yesterday, their reaction was that it paled in comparison to the speed and scale at which the technology industry is barreling ahead. And I just read an interesting analysis by my colleague, Steve Lohr, who covered the Microsoft case. And he basically said that this decision is a new set of rules for the tech giants to play by, but the game's still going. And so the question is, has the judge in this case changed the rules of the game enough to give one of the rookie players enough space on the field to compete with Google? Or have the rules changed too little and Google will just play the game again and win again?
Dave McCabe, pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you for having me.
David McCabe covers tech and the digital economy for the New York Times.
The Daily is supported by Progressive Insurance, helping protect small businesses with a variety of coverages like general liability, workers' compensation, and commercial auto. More at progressivecommercial.com. Go deeper into the day's most pressing stories with New York Times journalists, trusted sources, and the people affected. The Daily from the New York Times, distributed by American Public Media. APM produces and distributes programs that entertain and engage audiences everywhere.
The Daily is powered by the journalism of the New York Times. It's distributed by APM, American Public Media. You can go deeper into the stories you hear on The Daily at nytimes.com/The Daily. That's it for The Daily. I'm Rachel Abrams. See you tomorrow.
Every week on The Pulse, we hear stories at the heart of health, science, and innovation. Sometimes physicians make confessions.
We were dead wrong.
Nurses tell us what they dream about.
Beep, beep. Yes, you dream about it.
We explore how science is done.
When we're looking for the needle in the haystack, we want to look in the right haystack.
And we have frank discussions about ideas.
It's a joke.
The Pulse, Sundays at 2 p.m. on News 88.7.
Just under 6 years ago, then President Donald Trump hosted Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi at a big old rally in Houston.
Prime Minister Modi and I have come to Houston to celebrate everything that unites America and India.
Maybe the most memorable thing about the event, at least for me personally, was the two world leaders holding hands as they walked the rally floor.
Look at those hands. Are they small hands?
Fast forward 6 years, Trump's back in charge here, and Modi's still in charge there, but the bromance is on the rocks.
I always say tariffs is the most beautiful word to me in the dictionary.
And Modi is hanging out with Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin this week. And no, say it ain't so. He's holding hands with Vladimir!
Holding hands at one point, Vladimir Putin and Narendra Modi were.
Is the President of the United States gonna be okay? On Today Explained from Vox.
Live from NPR News in Culver City, California, I'm Dwayne Brown. Federal investigators seize cell phones, computers, and documents in their search of the home of former Trump advisor turned critic John Bolton last month. NPR's Ryan Lucas has more details.
Federal agents conducted a search of John Bolton's Maryland home late last month. Now the Justice Department has filed in federal court a redacted version of the search warrant and other documents in response to a request from media organizations, including NPR. The DOJ filing indicates that Bolton is under investigation for possibly gathering, transmitting, or losing defense information, and the potential unauthorized removal and retention of classified documents. A redacted copy of the inventory from the Bolton search shows that agencies' cell phones, hard drives, and computers, as well as typed documents and a binder labeled Statements and Reflections to Allied Strikes. Bolton served as Trump's national security advisor before becoming a fierce Trump critic. Ryan Lucas, NPR News, Washington.
In Utah, the parent company of Pornhub has agreed to pay the state $5 million to settle claims the company failed to block non-consensual and child sex abuse material. From member station KUER, Elle Crossley reports.
Utah's Attorney General and the FTC filed a complaint against the company ILO, which owns some of the world's largest pornography websites. The proposed consent order outlines steps ILO must take to stop distributing illegal content. FTC Commissioner Melissa Holyoke spoke at the Utah State Capitol.
This is important to the FTC, it's important to Utah in terms of making sure that this type of material does not get up on those websites.
If the company violates the settlement anywhere in the country, it could owe Utah another $10 million in fines. In a statement, ILO says it already has the FTC's terms in place, and the agreement boosts its safety efforts. For NPR News, I'm Elle Crossley in Salt Lake City.
This is NPR. A suicide bombing at a political rally in southwest Pakistan has killed 15 people. The Islamic State militant group has claimed responsibility, as Omkar Khandekar reports.
A suicide bomber blew himself up as supporters of the Balochistan National Party were leaving a rally at a stadium near Quetta city. A senior officer said the attacker couldn't get to the main gathering due to heavy security, so he detonated the bomb a few hundred yards from the exit gate. Local authorities have now banned public gathering in the province of Balochistan for the next 10 days. Analysts say the region is home to many separatist and Islamist militant groups. As per the Indian think tank South Asia Terrorism Portal, militant attacks have killed more than 700 people in the region this year. Omkar Khandekar, NPR News, Mumbai.
President Trump is hosting some big tech executives at the White House at dinner this evening, including the CEOs of Apple, Facebook, and Microsoft. Noticeably absent, though, is tech billionaire Elon Musk, who had a public fallout with Trump after his stint at the helm of the government-slashing department known as DOGE. Some of tonight's guests are also expected to participate in First Lady Melania Trump's AI Education Task Force. Stocks finish modestly or mostly higher on Wall Street today, following data showing a hiring slowdown by private employers.
Keep right.
This is NPR.
Straight on.
Support comes from Pearland, Texas, offering new construction with custom options and amenities, mature neighborhoods filled with trees, and urban living. Details at pearlandedc.com/inspiration. Pearland, inspiration lives here.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from listeners like you and from Live Nation, presenting Leon Bridges, The Crooner and the Cowboy, September 21st at Cynthia Woods Mitchell Pavilion. Tickets available at livenation.com.
Travel can open your mind and heart to new experiences, new people, and new ideas. Hey, I'm Rick Steves. Join me for an hour each week as we explore fun, affordable, and culturally expanding ways to experience the world. We'll meet authors, guides, and fellow travelers who can inform and inspire us to find our own adventures near and far from home. Join us for Travel with Rick Steves.
Travel with Rick Steves, Saturdays at 6 a.m. on News 88.7.
तुम सुन रही हो आज व्याख्या की. You're listening to Today Explained.
Sadanand Dahume is a fellow, specifically a fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. We started with why it matters that the United States and India get along in the first place.
I mean, well, it matters for a few reasons. The first is that maintaining a good relationship with India has been a central part of American strategy in the Indo-Pacific for at least 25 years. And the reasons for that are obvious. India is the most populous nation in the world. It is currently the world's 5th largest economy. It's predicted to be the 3rd largest economy at market exchange rates by 2028. It has the world's 2nd largest military, and it has a large and disputed boundary with China. So for all those reasons, it's also democratic.
Biggest democracy in the world.
Correct. And so for all those reasons, the U.S. has worked hard, particularly over the last 25 years, to have India lean towards the U.S. rather than lean towards China. And I think the U.S. strategy has been quite successful. But now, of course, it's all up in the air.
And before we talk about how it all ended up in the air, let's talk about how good it used to be, even between the two leaders who are now breaking up.
So Trump and Modi had quite a bromance in the first Trump administration.
Turn left.
To start with, I think both of them, many people saw them as having striking commonalities. Both are populist. Both were disliked by and dislike their traditional elites and their traditional mainstream media.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has never really given a press conference to Indian media.
And there was CNN, there was the New York Times, and they're both discussing really horrible groups of people.
Both had a habit of appealing directly to the masses in an unmediated way.
अकोला के लोग जरा पूरी ताकत से बताओ मेरा एक काम करोगे शाबाश बड़ा जोर है भाई
And we are going to make America great again.
And so in some ways they were similar characters, and Modi really went out of his way to woo Trump. He and Trump held this rally together in Texas called the Howdy Modi Rally.
India has a true friend in White House.
Is that where they held hands? They held hands at that one, right?
They've held hands in more than one place, but yeah, that's the one where Modi grabbed Trump by the hand and took him on a tour of this stadium. And then Modi invited Trump to Ahmedabad, which is in Gujarat, which is Modi's home state. And there in this giant cricket stadium, they had another rally called Namaste Trump to welcome Trump to India.
The life of Prime Minister Modi underscores the limitless promise of this great nation. He started out by his father's side as a chiwala, a tea seller.
I believe there were something like 100,000 people at that rally. And then before the 2020 election, Modi all but endorsed Trump, which is very unusual for a foreign leader, certainly for an Indian leader to do. And obviously Trump lost. But the Biden folks were very gracious about it, and they kind of ignored it and pretended it didn't happen.
Nice.
And then when Trump was reelected, Modi was one of the first foreign leaders to visit. He visited the White House in February, and he said that
MAGA plus MEGA तब बन जाता है MEGA.
MAGA plus MEGA, which is Make India Great Again, equals mega. And so, the bromance seemed to be going really well, and now suddenly it's not.
Tell us how that happened. What caused the breakup, if it is indeed that?
A couple of things happened. I think the first is that in February, when Modi visited, there was an announcement that the U.S. and India were working towards a trade deal, and that they wanted to more than double trade to $500 billion. And so the Indians thought that they had a bit of an inside track in terms of getting a trade deal.
We're very close to a deal with India where they open it up. Indonesia.
Reports back here in India suggest the Modi government is keen on securing a trade deal, but will keep national interest as priority.
That obviously has not happened.
Is the deal with India finalized?
No, it's not.
Okay.
The second thing, and I think this is the more important thing that went wrong, was that there was a brief military conflict between India and Pakistan in May.
These are two nuclear powers, and there are many people concerned that they will go to war.
Perhaps you do end up in a world where the idea of throwing punches between nuclear-armed neighbors and nuclear-armed adversaries is no longer as unthinkable.
And at the end of the 4 days, before Modi could say anything or announce anything to his own people or to his own country, Trump suddenly put out a truth on Truth Social, announcing a ceasefire and taking credit for it.
Truth Social. After a long night of talks mediated by the United States, I am pleased to announce that India and Pakistan have agreed to a full and immediate ceasefire.
So there was an embarrassment for Modi. India insists that it was their decision, decided between them and Pakistan.
Go straight on.
The Pakistanis, who can't believe their good fortune, have stepped up by nominating Trump for a Nobel Peace Prize.
Thank you very much. This I didn't know.
And so, as a result of all of this, Trump appears to be quite miffed with India and quite pleased with Pakistan. The Indians are miffed with Trump, and now it's all become much more complicated because Trump has not only applied 25% regular, what they call reciprocal sanctions in the lingo of this administration, but he's also slapped on an additional 25%, which he in fact refers to as sanctions, in retaliation supposedly for the fact that India buys lots of oil from Russia, and it really is going to hurt the Indian economy. So, that's really how the bromance has melted down.
I have to ask, hearing your timeline, is India in a trade war with the United States right now because essentially they impeded Trump's efforts to get a Nobel Peace Prize?
That is at least partly, and in my view, a large part of the explanation, yes.
Wow. Wow, if true.
I made this point in a Wall Street Journal column where I said that, look, there's still room for a grand bargain. But on a more serious note, if they're not able to come to an agreement, and if this continues, I do think public opinion in India is in danger of turning against the U.S. in a way that it really hasn't for a long time.
And is that bad for India too?
Oh, for sure. I mean, put yourself in India's shoes, right? They have this enormous neighbor, China. They have a disputed border. The Chinese lay claims to chunks of territory that the Indians regard as India, and vice versa. And so this means that India faces China, which is technologically more advanced, which has an economy about 5 times larger than India's. There was a border clash in 2020 in which 20 Indian soldiers lost their lives. But essentially, India is moving to mend relations with China, but it recognizes that fundamentally, it has a very deep problem with China that stretches back decades.
But they did just have a splashy little summit.
All together in Beijing, President Xi Jinping rolled out the red carpet for a security summit with Vladimir Putin and Prime Minister Modi, laughing and holding hands.
It is also saying that the era of one or two countries calling all the shots should end and must end. Instead of great powers issuing ultimatums, China wants dialogue over division, cooperation over zero-sum games.
Is India and Modi now trying to signal that things could be on the mend with China in light of what's going on with the United States?
So, Sean, my